Welcome to the Developing Leaders Impacting Kids podcast, a podcast all about sharing ideas, tips, and strategies to help you develop as a kid min leader. Thanks for listening to today's episode. To download today's show notes or to learn more about our certification program, training intensives, and Institutes of Children's Ministry, visit our website, cogop.org/children.
Hello and welcome to the Developing Leaders Impacting Kids podcast. I'm Sean McKinley, your host, and joining me today is our co-host Joy. Hey Joy, how are you?
Doing great. So happy to be here today.
Yeah, I'm glad to be back. I've missed a few of these podcasts, and so we're grateful to you for taking charge and leading the way. Today we are really excited to have a couple of great friends with us, two folks who have served alongside us in a couple of different ways in ministry. And I have the benefit of being blessed by their ministry because they're both from my own local church. Today we're going to be talking about how do we transition our children from children's ministries to youth ministries, how do we make sure that we do it well, how do we do the handoff, and how do we support families in this critical time of transition. So joining us today, we want to welcome, we have Cathy Baggerly, who is the children's pastor at the Peerless Road Church in Cleveland, Tennessee. She's been there for 19 years, almost 20 years. She's the senior member now of the staff, although she's far from being a senior citizen. So welcome, Cathy. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me today.
Sure. And also joining us, because this is a conversation about the transition from children to youth ministry, we actually brought a youth pastor on today. Imagine that. So we want to welcome Josh Brown. He's also been serving the Peerless Church family for now 6 years as youth pastor. So welcome, Josh.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so again, thank you guys for being here. One of the recent conversations we've been having in our ministry and our advisory team has been about this transition from children's ministry to youth ministry. A lot of our churches, a lot of our leaders have commented that they don't always handle this transition time well. They don't usually have a plan, and sometimes kids get lost during these years. So we wanted to have you guys on today just to share with our audience a little bit about your experiences. I personally have now had 2 children at my own local church go through this transition, and I'm very grateful that they had a positive experience. So when we thought, who can we bring on? I said, I want to bring on my own pastors this time and let them share with us. So we want to just start out. We have some questions for you guys today. And maybe, Cathy, we'll start with you since you're the senior member of the staff here.
Okay.
So it's always a question as to when the right time is to transition our kids from children's ministry to youth ministry. So is there a specific age or developmental milestone that you think kids should hit before they make this move from kids ministry to youth ministry, and how should a church or ministry decide what that age or milestone is?
Well, for us, we've done it different ways over the years, but what we've landed on is just the natural transition from elementary to middle school. So we transition our kids when they're in the fall of their rising to 6th grade. We transition them. Kids develop differently, and some of them are not as ready to go, but we just encourage that transition just go ahead and happen, that they transition when all their friends are transitioning. And normally we go ahead and do that. We have an awesome youth ministry that we're able to pass them on to. We have a transitional 6th grade where they can still come back to children's ministries on Sunday mornings through the 6th grade. And that helps them with that. We're just not just shoving them out the door, but they can still come back and visit. That's on Sundays, not on Wednesdays. We do have occasionally instances where there are some children who, with disabilities, emotional, mental disabilities, physical disabilities, and we will make exception to that and let them stay through the 7th grade. But normally a transition for us is when they go into 6th grade.
Sure. And I think that starts actually with our preschool ministry, right? They transition on a school calendar. Is that correct? Yeah. Prior to that, I think we're arranged by ages with the nursery and toddler, but once they hit preschool, all those transitions happen by grade, right?
Yes.
So, and then Josh, how about youth ministry? What does that look like?
As far as going back to that, I think you could say there's never really the perfect time to transition kids, because it's almost like a sink or swim thing. Some will sink and some will swim, and it can be difficult no matter whether it's 6th grade or 7th grade. Where I come from, the previous church, we actually waited until 7th grade because we recognized that the biggest development for new sixth graders came after that first semester of being in middle school. They get acclimated. They see older peers. They tend to get around a little bit more mature. How mature is left to be decided, but a little bit more of a mature environment. And so typically after that first semester, they are pretty well acclimated, I would say.
Yeah.
And that's what I see is that when they first move in sixth grade, they'll come back every Wednesday when service is over upstairs. They're going to come downstairs but then after that first semester, then you stop seeing them. That development usually hits after that first semester of being in sixth
and
grade.
I would say that that first 6 month, August to December, that first 6 month stretch is the most pivotal, and you either keep them or you lose them in that 6 month stretch. And I think that I have seen my fair share of both, where I've had some that have really fully bought in that time period, and you can see that moment where they're like, okay, I get this. Like I've adjusted, and then I've seen those that have just kind of fallen off, and for various reasons, whether that be not adapting well or just kind of falling through the cracks. But that's I would agree with that. So.
And in youth ministry, how are you structured at your church, Josh? Do you have middle school age?
We have middle school. We run all the way. We're 11 to 18 years old, and it's such a vast range of emotions and understanding and background. But yeah, we run 11 to 18, and we are actually in the process, and I'm sure we'll get into this in a little bit, actually in the process of trying to separate the two ministries, trying to find a way, because the more advanced, I was having this conversation with somebody last night, the more advanced technology gets, I feel like sometimes the longer it takes some students to develop. The more screen time, the more it kind of inhibits development, personally, relationally, spiritually. So we're actually in the process of trying to find a way to positively divide up the middle school and high school ministry so that we know that each ministry and each student is getting that adequate development rather than just doing it all together and hoping that everyone catches on.
Sure.
So obviously there are probably some hurdles and difficulties that you face. And so I wanted to ask, what is the most difficult obstacle you face as children's and youth pastors during this time of transition? Josh?
I think it goes back to the buy-in, and getting after spending 4, 5, 6 years, actually from birth, because you oversee the preschool and nursery as well, having Pastor Cathy as their liaison, their pastor for the better part of 10 or 11 years, and then switching over to somebody totally different. I think that it's a shock factor. And so the relationships, if the relationships aren't formed, that might be the biggest obstacle and hurdle at the time. And so that's why I try to intervene and start to form those relationships prior to them ever reaching the sixth grade. 4th, 5th grade, I'm starting to learn names. I'm starting to try to form those relationships before they ever, darken the doors of the youth ministry. So
yeah, because when you're in elementary ministries, there's so much communication with the parents.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden they lose some control, and it becomes more the communication with the child. And so the parents feel like they're losing some control of their child. So we're just working to make that not
That's a good
issue.
point. Communication may be another thing, because the communication goes from the parents to pretty much the students. And we try to keep our parents as involved and informed as much as possible. But every 11 and 12-year-old now has a phone in their hands, so that communication almost bypasses the parents. If the parents aren't strategically involved, it bypasses the parents and goes straight to the students. So you may communicate with them and they're like, well, I didn't get that text, or I didn't, and they did. So that may be one of the biggest obstacles.
We also, a hurdle or obstacle that we have is we have outreach ministry. And we see that when the children don't have family there at the church, it's more difficult for them
for sure.
to stay. That transition is very difficult for kids who don't have a strong family in the church.
Yeah. So I hear when you were talking about obstacles, 2 words that I kept hearing were relationships and communication. And so, Josh, when you have a new student coming in from children's ministry, suddenly you have to gain some trust with not only the student, but their parents, as you were mentioning there. So maybe what are some specific ways that you work at building these new relationships with not only the students, but the parents?
I will be the first to admit that this was my weakness for the first few years of youth ministry, because it was my hope that kids were so excited about youth ministry that they just automatically adapted. And so this was my first big flaw that I recognized in myself and noticed that I had to change, or else our youth ministry was never going to grow. We were never going to be able to retain students unless they were just regular church kids. So actually, here in the last few months, we have began to develop a specific strategy for our rising sixth graders in developing a specific discipleship plan, because I know that the change in atmosphere from kids ministry to youth ministry can be so vast and so difficult. So trying to develop a specific discipleship plan for them that will cover either the first and second semester of their sixth grade year, to where essentially they will join us in worship, and then after worship separate and be able to have a discipleship plan, because we do have a large class coming up. I think somewhere 20 new sixth graders coming up this year. And if you're not careful, you will lose, a good portion of them, because they just fall through the cracks. They're small, they're overlooked, and they can just fall through the cracks so easily. So, and in doing that, pulling the parents in as much as possible. I've started making connections with some of these parents of these rising sixth graders and saying, hey, this is what we're looking at doing, and we want to involve you and inform you as much as possible. So trying to go ahead and create those relationships and the communication, opening up that line so that parents are knowing, hey, they're opening this line of communication with the pastor, with their team, all of that. So trying to do that has been probably the most beneficial so far as we work towards this new ministry, and parents seem to be a little more receptive and a little more open to what we have going on. So,
do you have any ideas or suggestions? Do you have a way of intentionally connecting your youth group with these new rising students?
Actually, we do. We have a leadership team. We run a student leadership team of about 12 students that have gone through an application process and all of that. And we are also, along with this new ministry that we're trying to develop, intentionally placing one or two student leaders over a group, but to make sure that they are responsible for when students show up. Hey, how are you? How was your day? Just making sure that they feel that instant moment of connection, and that they're not just sitting there waiting on service to start, and then they just kind of feel, isolated. So
yeah, I would think that would be critical in a larger youth ministry.
Absolutely.
That they be able to form peer relationships, not just with you.
Absolutely.
We have also in the past, and we're planning to do that this summer, before they transition in the fall, we're going to send our rising sixth graders up to enjoy some activities with the youth this year. That helps out.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's where they get like a cult, they get a feel of it, a little acclimated before they actually go.
And I've noticed in the past couple of years how that has helped form, so that way when August comes around, they're not just totally in shock of, okay, I don't know what to do.
Sure.
So that has definitely helped in years past.
So Cathy, as a children's pastor, like myself, we always have kids that do not want to leave children's ministry. They just want to stay forever. But of course, we have those kids that are nibbling at the bit to get out of kids ministry. So I wanted to ask, what do you do with those kids who are really just having a hard time connecting with youth ministry?
I'd like to add, like Josh said, I've had them in my ministry for so long. A children's pastor has, and when they move, you kind of have an ego where, like, you like that they come back. You like that, they love me. They want to stay here. You have to just set that aside, and you want to see them. You want to see them flourish and do well in youth ministry, and just let them go, and be glad and celebrate that they're so happy where they're at. Again, kids tend to transition easier, some of them if they have a sibling that has already gone into youth, that is already there, or if they have a cousin or family member, or they transition easier. Sometimes it's harder for those kids that don't have connections already there. So we just try to communicate, encourage them, that they're going to do fine, and that they have a huge support group around them.
Awesome. So we've discussed earlier what the greatest hurdle may be as you transition kids to youth ministry. But I wanted to ask both of you, what is the greatest blessing that you've experienced during that process?
Like I just said, I think for me, it's just the blessing of seeing them do well. I want to see them flourish. I want to see them be involved in the leadership if that's their talent, and just doing well, making friends, growing in their faith. It's just always, for me, wonderful to watch the kids, how they are growing and flourishing in the Lord in their discipleship process.
What about you, Josh?
Yeah, this class that we have that are about to become seniors, and I think this is a perfect way to represent this. They were sixth graders when I got here, just short of 6 years ago, and so this is and Sean, your daughter was one of those that was in sixth grade when I started, and knowing the powerful children's ministry that they come from, and knowing how Pastor Cathy invests and develops and teaches and leads and all of that, and then watching them step into a youth ministry and continue to walk that faith and continue to live it out, and watching them grow in that is probably excuse me, one of the biggest blessings, is knowing, hey, our church has done a great job at not just developing them, but pushing them towards whatever God has called them to do. So, and especially watching, as you know, I've had many senior classes getting ready for another graduation tonight, and watching seniors walk across the stage and knowing that they're pursuing what God has called them to do. I think that is the most rewarding and fulfilling thing I think that I could ever do in my life.
And even I think from the children's ministry perspective, even though we may not be engaged, I'm not speaking for Cathy, but we're not engaged in what you do in youth ministry, we are there celebrating just as much, because I am now 22 years at Peerless Church, former children's pastor before Pastor Cathy, and those were kids that we had, at some point in their journey. And what a blessing it is to see, I think, for all of us, to see them mature and grow. And those who've listened to the podcast know my area of specialty is preschool ministry. That's where I love to be. And even in that transition, when we hand them off to Cathy, I know in 6 months, most of them are never going to come back and see me. Some of them will forget my name in a year from now. But you just trust that the foundation you laid, the seeds you planted, will flourish and grow.
And you can't say this for every... how many churches do you find that have a children's pastor for 20 years, or even a youth pastor for 6 years? Sure. The average tenure of a youth pastor now is 18 to 24 months, and then they're on to whatever is. And I'm sure a children's pastor, it may be a little bit longer than that, but I think tenure is so crucial and important, and shows why children's ministry and youth ministry at Peerless is thriving so much.
And with that, too, my earlier question to you about those peer relationships, if you are in that cycle of constantly having a new youth pastor, a new youth leader or director, having those relationships that having that structure that's not so dependent on the youth pastor,
absolutely
helps sustain that. So Josh, you experienced transitions as well in youth ministry. Again, we've talked a little bit about middle school to high school, and now high school to young adult ministry. Would you say, tell us a little bit about that experience, and maybe has that helped you to understand the perspective of Cathy as she goes through this?
Absolutely. It's always a bittersweet thing to lose students. And just to be totally transparent, wasn't something we did well until the last 12 to 16 months, I would say. We didn't really have a young adult ministry that was set in stone, that was ready and prepared to take new students or young adults in. And so it made it really difficult, because I felt like I was leading them after Pastor Cathy had led them for so long. I was leading them for 6 years, but I wasn't leading them to anything. It was almost like, okay, hey, you've reached the young adult age. Now, best of luck. It was like dropping them off of a cliff and hoping that they can fly. So I would say the last 12 or 16 months has been so refreshing to know that we have Pastor Eric and Jenny Barker that oversee our young adult ministry. They do a fantastic job. And I told them this on Sunday during our graduate recognition, that it's great to know that we can take students, even though I hate losing them, is that we have a place that we can lead students to and know that they're going to get the spiritual care, the emotional care that they need to continue to flourish in their lives.
And I think because most of the audience who's listening is Church of God of Prophecy. Mm-hmm. And I don't know about around the table here, but I think Cathy can relate to me. For so long in our church, youth ministry was 12 to 35. There was such a huge gap. And even I think even a great church like Peerless Church, that was a little bit ingrained into our structure for a while. And so it's really been exciting to see that youth ministry is not just that 12 to 35, but you've found ways to serve each particular segment within that category.
So I wanted to ask, you all do a special ceremony service at your church to transition kids. I believe it used to be called the Bridge Ceremony. Would you share a little bit about that, what that looks like, and just kind of how your communication in the middle of that helps it to be such a good transition?
Well, again, we want to celebrate this transition, celebrate it not just in the children's ministry and the youth ministry with our entire church, to embrace those children who are moving to youth ministry. So we plan and prepare for a special service where all of our children's ministry staff is there and our youth ministry staff is up front, and we celebrate and actually call the child's name and have a ceremony where they come across the stage and we pass them from children's ministries to youth ministries.
Have you seen that? How do the kids respond to that typically? Are they excited about
Yes.
it? Okay.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, they're always looking forward. The bridge that we had for so long, hundreds of names.
Are written.
They would always take a Sharpie and write their, it's a rite of passage. And they always have looked forward to that and have always said, you know what, I can't wait till I can walk the bridge. So they're excited about it.
I jokingly say walk the plank because you're going to walk the plank.
And your communication during this process is also very important. So would you just mind sharing a little bit about what that looks like between the children's pastor and the youth pastor?
I would say that Cathy and I have had a very good relationship. We pick at each other a lot. But we've never had a time or a season where we didn't, communicate well and didn't get along well. We know first and foremost, it's about the students. It's about the kids that are, their ministry, their development, their well-being. So we've always had a good line and open line of communication when it comes to ministry. We work in the office, 5 days a week together. We see each other all the time. So it makes it easier to do ministry with somebody that you're constantly around and you can communicate with and have fun with and all of that. So
he came in and we go through the list of each name. And we talk about each child, and I try to give them some insight into who that child is and where they're at and what their family life is like and how they are spiritually. And we just did that recently. We went through each name.
Yeah, and being able to sit down and go through that list and, okay, when's their birthday? And if they've got birthdays over the summer, starting to send birthday cards out. Just little things that they're getting from Pastor Josh that knows that, hey, he's already taking steps. And so I think it's important, and having that open line of communication it makes both ministries work so much better.
And Joe, I think this is where I stop just to mention to those who are listening that we do have a training that is available to help churches through this process called Influencing the Influencers. And it's all about how churches can work with the home to build that confident, resilient faith in their kids. But one of the major pieces of that training is what we call milestone moments. We identify 6 different milestones in the spiritual life of a kid, and one of them is this. We've labeled the transition from children to youth because we think it's so crucial and important. So if there's a church listening out there and they're interested in receiving more training, we hope they'll reach out to us. We have these resources that are available to them. I just have to say, as a father of 2 children now that have gone through this process, they really were excited for the bridge ceremony, just to be up in front of the church, to be recognized, to be welcomed by the youth group. It was such a pivotal moment in their journey. And I have to applaud Pastor Cathy and Pastor Josh because it is approached with such dignity and excitement, and they both felt very welcomed into the youth group, and I was just so happy to have that rite of passage.
Absolutely.
And to celebrate as a church.
Yeah.
It's not just the parents, not just the staff, but
and
church.
It's important. Like the previous church I came from, there was an announcement made, hey, we'll be transitioning all of our students up this coming Wednesday night, and that was the extent of it. And so now that I think Peerless has, in the past few years, made a emphasis and a point to say, hey, we want to recognize it on a Sunday morning so that parents, not just the students, but parents and grandparents begin to see the importance that we place on both ministries. Mm-hmm. And it has helped leaps and bounds with the support of the children's ministry, the support of the youth ministry, when they see that emphasis being placed.
Sure. Well, I was walking through the church the other day and I saw something, and I just thought it was precious. I don't even know exactly what was happening, but one of the older teens was there with Pastor Cathy, off to the side, and I could tell that she was really disturbed by something, but I could tell Cathy was comforting her, counseling her, advising her, and I thought, boy, what a beautiful picture that, Cathy, you've been able to maintain a relationship even though these kids move on from the ministry. And so you've more than 20 years in children's ministry. How many total? Do you want to say? She doesn't want to say. Okay, but when she came to Peerless Church, I knew that she had already such a great experience in kids ministry. So you've seen a lot of kids come and go over time. So in what ways do you still maintain a relationship and influence these kids even though they're not in your ministry every single week?
Graduations, we got graduations going on this weekend. I love to, invitations and going to graduation parties. Many of them still work in children's ministries. As soon as they get out of youth ministries, they cycle right back around and want to volunteer. They volunteer on Sundays in nursery, preschool, and elementary. We have a camp. My camp is almost fully staffed with kids that have come through the ministry themselves. It's wonderful to attend weddings. I've been there so long. There's, weddings and then baby dedications, births. Just have had a wonderful life of being able to love on these kids through all the stages of their lives. And I don't, I may not be directly ministering to them any longer, on a Sunday morning, but I hope I'm still ministering to them when I see them and just loving on them.
Yeah. Well, I really applaud just the relationship you and Pastor Josh have, that there doesn't have to be this tension or sense of particular ownership of those kids, that you see the value of those relationships and maintaining those. I think that's important. In a lot of churches, we see them, we are the shepherd of those kids, and we don't want, joy.
It's easy to let the ego, you can let your ego, get the best of you. But you just have to applaud all the stages of their lives and see all the accomplishment and the things that they're doing, and it's great. And it's
Absolutely. Been
wonderful, working with Pastor Josh. We've had, like you said, we've had a great relationship, and I think we both see the importance. It's not about us. It's not our ministry.
Sure.
And so we want to see them succeed and their families succeed. And
not to have that sense of being threatened by those relationships, but encouraging them that we're all part of this community that's trying to disciple these kids into a flourishing spiritual life. So we are nearing the end of our time together. Josh, you mentioned earlier that this really is a season of sink or swim. And I think, at least in our circles, we're seeing that now. And, I'll just be honest, from the very top of our organization for more than a year, our presiding bishop and general presbyter have been telling us, this is a void in our churches and we need it to be addressed. And so as we've watched this and we see that sometimes parents do struggle, kids do struggle during this season of sink or swim, if there's one thing that you've witnessed or an area where parents need support, can you encourage our listeners to pay attention to those areas? What are those areas? What have you seen? And how can they come alongside kids and families during this time? Pastor Josh?
I have noticed a tendency, the parents that especially in the 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, when they start to get that little bit of freedom, where kids tend to start to pull away. They want that privacy. They want that, hey, just leave me alone almost. And I think every student goes through it. And for some parents, if it's the first child, they really don't know how to handle it, don't know what to say or what to do. But trying to help them navigate that. And I think that I can think of a few specific relationships off the top of my head that I've had over the past 6 years at Peerless, of where I've been able to step in and form relationships and open that line of communication back between the students and the parents, and just really challenging them to do that. But that would probably be one of the biggest struggles that I think parents have, is that puberty age and all of that. When they start to grow up, when they start to mature a little bit, they want that space. And some parents just really don't know how to deal with it, don't know how to handle it, and don't know how to respond to it. So often they respond in anger or frustration, and then they don't realize that it just pushes the student or child further away. So that's been one of the biggest things I think some parents struggle with.
Yes, again, it's just we're addressing that loss of control. We've have been trying to address a lot of the cultural issues that parents are struggling with. We've had our parent talks where we get relevant topics and try to prepare them for some of the issues that they're going to be facing, not necessarily in elementary, but in their teen years that they're going to be facing.
Absolutely.
And everywhere that I have gone, and at any time I'm addressing parenting and how to support parents, I do believe those who've listened again to the podcast or been with us in a training, I believe children's ministry in a way is becoming family ministry, because our parents have so many discipleship needs that are not being met. But I talk a lot about the parent talks, Cathy. So could you just tell everybody, just very basic level, what these parent talks are and how you do those?
Just I've asked the parents, what are some topics, that you would like some help with, some training in. And so I just go through those topics and try to find a professional or someone. We're blessed here to have Lee University and lots of professionals that have had in to address topics like transgender, just a lot of the relevant
technology.
Pastor
Darren was able to do an amazing parent talk on. There's so many facets of technology that I don't understand at 33 years old, and I know parents don't understand. And so being able to open eyes in avenues that we couldn't address has been really cool to see.
And so we usually just do those on a Sunday night once a month. Everybody just comes in. There's food. That's always a plus, right?
Yes.
But we've heard from some great professionals, even people that I knew of that I didn't know could speak to such, incredible, important issues right now, particularly around culture. But you've even done some practical things like budgeting, how finances and budgeting, how to teach kids about money. And so
because all of a sudden the little elementary child is now the teen that has a check card or needs money.
I just think it's been a fantastic ministry that you all have added on. So thank you for that.
Yeah, so obviously the whole church should be involved in this transition process. So I wanted to ask, where does the lead pastor, volunteers, and even other church members fit in this process? Maybe what are some attitudes, responses that would be helpful as you are continuing this discipleship process?
I think acknowledgement from leadership, and we've been blessed, to have that. But prayer support, we have a prayer partners. All of our children are covered in prayer by our prayer partner, even when they move to youth ministry.
Very, very specifically, not just not just pray for our students, but they get pictures and they know that, hey, this is my child that I'm praying for this year, this school year. So it's huge. I would say buy-in. It's the old adage: it takes a village. And I am blessed to say, and I think Pastor Cathy would agree, that at Peerless it has truly been that feel. We're family. And so Pastor Darren has done a fantastic job. Of course, he's had three kids come up through children's ministry and the youth ministry, and so he knows the importance of both of them. He understands and recognizes, and he puts the emphasis to the church. Whenever we're in need of financial assistance or people to volunteer, nursery and preschool, whatever it may be, he's done a fantastic job of making sure that that's a priority and it's not something that's just overlooked and left for us to fend for. Because a lot of pastors probably would. They would just say, find your help, find your volunteers. But he's done a fantastic job of orchestrating volunteers. And I know that Pastor Cathy has a great volunteer base with Awana and her summer ministry and all of that. And that's just so crucial, because I know that I could not do it without my team, my youth board, I could not make this ministry work. So
it's really important, as Josh said, the financial support as well.
Absolutely.
That they support us with the pocketbook, knowing how important it is to help us out. So with the ministries that we have, the things that we have going.
Well, I think it's been a great conversation. We're so grateful to have had Pastor Cathy Baggerly and Pastor Josh Brown with us today. Joy, I'm taking a lot of things away from this conversation. I think for a lot of our listeners, I know when I go to, again, when I do training events, when I'm at different conferences, I hear no matter what the size of the congregation, this is an area that is of real concern for churches. And it hurts my heart when you use the language of sink or swim, but it's very accurate. We certainly don't want to lose any of our kids, and this does seem to be a season where that can so often happen in the local church.
And I feel challenged today. I'm a children's pastor at my church, but just from your conversation, like one of the things I took away is maybe making a profile of the kids, just basic information. Hey, this is Alexa. She plays basketball, just simple things like that could make it a smoother process.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think a lot of the success is, as I'm listening, it's the relationship that you two have working together. And again, not having that sense of being intimidated by one another or threatened, but you have to work together in a partnership, really. And that's where communication is so key. But also, I think having a plan. You obviously have a plan. You're refining it even now. As Joy and I look at it, we think, boy, that was a pretty good plan. But
it's never too late to add or subtract from ministry. You don't have to do the same things over and over and over again. You can do new things. And I think that's important to recognize as times change, as kids change. It's important to be able to develop and stay adaptable.
Sure. Well, for those of you who are listening, if you're interested particularly about having a ceremony to honor or recognize this transition from children to youth, you can look on today's show notes. We have a recommended outline for doing such a ceremony, as well as some additional resources that might help you as you address this in your own local church.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. To download today's show notes or to learn more about our certification program, training intensives, and Institutes of Children's Ministry, visit our website, cogop.org/children.